Welcome to the Fifth Inning Podcast, where we talk about hot topics in youth baseball. I'm your host, Hunter Vansaw, alongside my co-host, Chris Scarcella.
Hunter, happy to be here, man.
What's up, man?
I know, man.
All right, and today we've got alongside us John Scheschuk. Chris, if you want to give John a quick introduction.
Yeah, John Scheschuk was a Texas A&M Hall of Famer, probably one of the best first basemen of all time at Texas A&M. One of my former teammates, our captain on two Big 12 championship teams and a College World Series team in 1999. John's also on the board with me of Texas Force Baseball. Played with the San Diego Padres back in the 2000, 2001, 2002 timeframe. John, happy to have you on, and welcome to the Fifth Inning Podcast.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the intro there, and excited to be here. And Hunter, thank you as well. Looking forward to talking today.
Awesome. Well, John, the topic we've got today to cover is more along the lines of, the difference between select baseball and rec baseball in youth sports in today's day and age. Now, obviously, Chris and I are pretty engulfed in this right now, and running with the Texas Force Baseball organization, but I want to start our first inning topic with the question of, what have you seen as the evolution of youth baseball over the last 15 to 20 years?
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot. I mean, that's goes without saying. It has changed a lot in my lifetime for sure. When Chris and I were kids, it was neighborhood baseball, and it was very competitive. It was all little league, to my knowledge. I know some folks played in the Pony organization back then, but for the most part, it was little league. And for the most part, every kid in a specified area played in that league. And for the most part, it was dad coached. I mean, I can think of a couple of examples where you had folks who were not affiliated specifically with a kid, but the overwhelming majority of the time it was dad coach or dad led, and even the board was full of dads. So it's changed a lot. I remember those days. It was very competitive. It was a lot of fun. I mean, every single day you went to school, you were rubbing shoulders with the kids that you were going to play at the league park that night. So definitely different relative to today. And that's what we're going to talk about, some of those differences.
Yeah. So, I mean, even now I feel like, a little bit about my story too. Like when I first got into coaching, right out of college, I was coaching at Little League, and I was coaching a machine pitch 8U team. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, man, like youth baseball is just really different nowadays.
Yeah.
And then, obviously fast forward a couple years later to now, being involved in a youth sports organization, like, yeah, it has definitely changed from the time that I was a kid. That's for sure.
Yeah. I can think back when I was playing, John, the same era. It's like, man, it's I don't remember there being a select atmosphere until maybe high school, right? And there was maybe one or two teams in all of Houston that was that select, and they played against Dallas and different cities, not necessarily within the same city. It's definitely changed considerably. So crazy.
Yeah.
Well, John, so tell us a little about like where you fall within like the youth baseball space. Like, do you like where do you have, how old are your kids? Like, where are they at along this, timeline?
Sure. We have four kids ranging from 16 to 7. Where I am in youth baseball is with my 7-year-old son, Samuel. He is playing for a rec league team right now, and then he's also playing for a club team, which, saying that out loud, Hunter, sounds crazy. I'm not even sure how we got there for a 7-year-old kid. Sounds like I'm that guy. I'm that guy now.
At least he's not 4 years old playing select baseball.
True. Yeah. The team he plays for is dad led. It's a good friend of mine and a really good guy that does a great job. And we have full intentions of getting going with the Force next year and beyond. So that's where we are now. I coach the rec league team. I do not coach the club team. So I'm letting him get some coaching from other people this spring.
Nice. Do you have like any input in those practices though? Like, because I mean, I know obviously with your background and your knowledge in baseball, that probably play a pretty big deal at practice, especially for like those other parents that are involved with the team.
Yeah, indirectly I do, Hunter, but not directly. And that's on purpose. So I was speaking with Michael Myrick, the coach of that team, and beforehand, when he told me he was going to take it over, I said, "Hey, this is your club, and it's on purpose for me because I wanted Samuel to learn how to play for somebody else." Now, the reason I said indirectly is because we coached the 6U All-Star team for the rec league last summer, and we put together a practice plan really based on a lot of things we did at A&M and even with the Padres organization, which is funny to have 6-year-old kids do that, but it's surprising how much they can adapt, and the system. So indirectly, I have influence on some of those practices because Michael has taken some of the things that we did last summer and used them. And then of course he has his own secret sauce that he adds to it as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you mentioned, I got one thing right there you picked up on. So you mentioned they can adapt, right? And so implementing some of the stuff that we did at A&M or even in pro ball, like what I found, no matter how young these kids are, the better coaching that they get, the more you kind of challenge them it sounds weird to say, challenge a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, they actually pick up on that stuff. And ultimately the better they're going to be and the more they're going to develop. So I think that's one of the evolutions that we've seen with baseball is that they're getting better coaching. They're getting better coaching at an earlier age than what maybe we had, 25, 30 years ago. And therefore, when they get to high school or when they get to college ball, these guys are absolute pros already, right? Yeah. And that's a result of kind of some of that shift.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a huge deal. Like, especially when you're looking at, hey, now whenever you're like in an area like Houston, Texas, where it's like a hotbed of college or of high school baseball, where you have the number 1 ranked Pearland High School, number 1 ranked Friendswood High School, and then we've got top 10s all across the city. Yeah, like you want to make sure that your kid has the upper hand on the competition whenever it gets time to when they're a freshman in high school. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess with that, Jess, is a question back to you. So you're doing both right now with Samuel, but so with the growing number of select teams out there, they're popping up everywhere, right? Where does ultimately rec ball fit in? Where do you see that heading in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that the rec leagues are going to continue to have to adapt in order to survive. I think there will always be a place for the kid who is not as competitive and who really does just want to play baseball. I think there's a place for kids in that environment. And I also think there's a place for parents in that environment. Some parents like that, and I commend them for that. I understand that. However, I think even your mid-range and potentially even your lower range kids from a talent perspective and maybe even a desire perspective are going the select or club route. So my opinion is the leagues are going to have to continue to evolve their schedules. Does it turn into we're only going to play on the week in rec league, and then on the weekends we're going to allow teams to go out and play club sports? I think you're going to have to see something like that for them to survive long term. Now, that stated, the Friendswood Youth Baseball League is packed. Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of kids out there. So I think youth baseball is still alive and well at the rec level. What I see is it's younger kids. I think by the time they're 8, 9, 10, 11, it's gone. But I see a lot of even 4U, 5U, 6U, 7U, and 8U. The numbers for those levels are high. And I think it's a great starting place. And I think you'll continue to see that. But as you get into the 9s, 10s, 11s, and 12s, if they want to survive at those levels, they're going to have to adapt schedule-wise just to accommodate the club sports.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's the way I kind of see it too. It's a good starting place, right? It's a community, playing with friends, make sure that they enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, what gets lost in select out there, I hate the word, by the way, select. It's like, I like the word club a little bit better. They need to have fun, right? They're still 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 12. They're still kids. They need to have fun. I think you can do both. I think you can be competitive and still play with your friends and still define team in every aspect. So
I saw a really cool analogy for all of this, not just in baseball, but just in youth sports in general, where think of it like a toddler where they need to crawl, then they'll take their first steps, or they'll stand, and then they can get to walk, and then they get to run. Yeah, I feel like that's a very good analogy to put whenever we're thinking about youth baseball in general, because I mean, you don't want to throw your kid too soon into this highly competitive environment where now they are going to be the worst person on the team, or maybe not as adept as the other players that they're working with. And it's going to be harder for them to play catch, and it's going to be harder for them to just enjoy the game of baseball because they're so stressed out by not being good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where, early on in youth baseball and youth sports, where rec league does play a huge, like a big deal in the development of kids in youth sports and baseball. Now, and that's where I feel like, whenever we go to, when you're making the decision to put a kid into whether, should I continue to keep him in Little League? Should I continue to play Little League and select or travel baseball or whatever you want to call it? Is it too soon? Right. And I think it really stems from, the thought of, okay, well, where does my kid stand? Number one, having that self-evaluation. And if you don't feel like you have a good understanding of that, asking for someone's, opinion as well is always good. Now, you might not like what they have to say all the time, but I definitely think it's a good starting place, is just to understand where your kid perceives to the other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jess, that's another good segue there. So if you're, obviously your background, you have Samuel in playing rec, and he's playing with the club team right now. But when would you advise a parent kind of start considering that move? Right? What is that? What do you think there is? There a certain time frame? Is there, just depends on the kid? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the kid. I think my son is a competitive person. He has a lot of passion towards the game. You can see that during the game. So I know he enjoys that higher level of competition.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a great baseball player. It's just the instincts that I see with him on the field. And in this case, the team that he's playing on is all of his friends. So that's still a neighborhood team. So it's a combination of both his competitive desire and also the fact that his friends have made that team and that's where they're playing. As far as, answering the question on when a kid should go, it is strictly on a case-by-case basis, in my opinion. I think you have to feel out, does the kid really enjoy playing the game? Is he competing at a high level in the rec league? Does it make sense for him to compete at a higher level outside the rec league? Is he enjoying baseball?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are factors. That may come for some kids at 5 years old, which is crazy to say. It may come for some kids when they're 12. So I don't think you can write the book on a kid right away. I think you just have to let it play out on a year by year basis and see what they want to do. And I think their actions and their success will lead each parent to the right direction for that child.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was talking to Hunter the other day. I said, I probably told you this story too with my son. It's about when he was 7. We were doing exactly what you're doing, John, and playing both. But we were on the way to a practice in the rec league there, and Jackson said, "Hey, Dad, are we going to an Astros practice or are we going to a Rebels practice?" And said, "Son, we're going to a Rebels practice." And he, little 6-year-old time playing 7, he goes, "Yes." And I said, "Why do you say that? Why are you so pumped that we're going to a Rebels practice?" He said, "Dad, because I like my Astros team, but there's only a couple of people I can play catch with." And so right then I kind of said, okay, well, maybe this is something we need to take a look at, and ultimately, don't want him to get bored. Number one, number two, challenge him a little bit more consistently. So that was kind of the deciding moment for me to kind of decide, what we're going to do next, right?
Yeah.
So.
I think a question that I have just based off of that is like, when is it time to make that decision? Like, what helps you go to that decision? Is it like, you feel out where your kid's at, you ask him and probe him with questions, or is it more of like your evaluation on your kid in comparison to the rest of the teams, or I guess the kids on the team? Like, is that like which of those things kind of weighs more on your decision to make the change?
For me, I guess I'd say, I think that there's a number of different things. I think it depends, and I hate, that answer too, but you can compare your kid to maybe how some of the other players are. Maybe at the end of the day, you don't want them to lose love for the game, right? So to challenge them, be in a more competitive environment, all of those things. But I think even if you have a son that, this is my opinion, if you have a son that maybe they want to get better at baseball, or they love baseball and they want to play a little bit more, they may not be the top echelon of that rec league as an example, but you come over to an organization, choose the right organization that has professional coaches and has guys with backgrounds like John, or yourself, or me, or the number of 19 other ones that we have with Force. They're going to get better coaching more than likely outside of the rec league. And so I think that's another way to look at it too, right? If I'm going to play baseball, or if my son's going to play baseball, where do I give them the best opportunity to ultimately develop, right? So
Love that. And John, this one's more for you. Now, what, let's say you're having more of a challenge, I guess, with, your son. Let's say he's not necessarily seeing the difference between, okay, should I go play select or club baseball versus, rec league baseball? What if you as a parent is really struggling to get them to be motivated to go and play on a club team where, maybe they don't have a super big passion for baseball? Or what if, you don't see that motivation towards baseball that maybe someone like yourself did growing up as a kid? Like, is there a challenge that you want to have to your own son or child to kind of push them in that direction? Or is it more of like, hey, if they're not ready for it, I'm just going to, leave them out for now?
Yeah, it would be the latter for me. I think if there wasn't a lot of engagement or interest, or if it was a chore to get them to work at it, I would probably lean toward just leaving them in rec ball. I think the story's going to write itself with the kid. I think it's very hard to keep a kid away from it if they're passionate about it and love it. And I think it's very hard to get them started if they're not passionate about it. So I think the story really does write itself. But back to what we were talking about a second ago, one thing that I noticed in coaching that 6U All-Star team, and we had a good squad. We had a lot of kids that could catch and throw, and we had kids who understood what it meant to run the bases. They had a lot of awareness and instincts. And it was very eye-opening to me as I came into this season, because those kids on that team, which is primarily the club team that Samuel's playing on today, they're legit. You can tell that summer of high-level competition and high-level coaching and practicing a lot, it created separation. There's no doubt about it. And I mean that with no disrespect to kids who weren't on that team.
Right.
It's just the reps at that level.
Yeah.
And the competitiveness on a daily basis throughout a whole summer, you see a big jump in kids.
Yeah.
And so that was another determining factor for me to say, okay, I love the rec league. I enjoy it personally. It's fun for me. I like being around the neighborhood. I like going up there. All those things are great for me personally. But I also saw the other side of the coin, like, okay, there is a competitive world out there, even for 7 and 8-year-old kids. And that was one of the reasons we jumped into it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw a post on social media not too long ago, it was a couple of days ago, and it was someone's 8-year-old kid, and they had kind of like a highlight tape with the 8-year-old, which again, some of it sounds kind of interesting, but I mean, this kid's making some pretty solid plays, right? And the caption was, even at 8 years old, right? It's not just about, getting ice cream after the game, like some people like to say. I mean, these kids are good early on, and, see what happens. They'll write their own story as they get older, and kids will fall off for different reasons and decide to go play another sport for because that's where their passion is and all that stuff. But end of the day, you can't ignore the fact that 8-year-olds can play the game pretty well.
Yeah.
They do know you'd be surprised if you actually challenge them and work with them how fast they pick up the game. And you probably saw it, John, and I know I saw it with when I took the 7-year-old team and went and played, and I was like, whoa, there is a whole nother level of baseball out there, and we got a lot of work to do, right? So
I think it also comes to every single kid is going to be different, and they're going to have different passions with the sport of baseball in general, right? You're going to have kids that love the game of baseball because it's a time where they get to spend it with their friends.
Yeah.
And then you're also going to have kids that love the game of baseball because they can absolutely dominate. And, there's a different level of competitiveness with every single kid. And I think that's also the other thing that kind of whenever we're going to make that decision of, okay, rec ball or club baseball, right? Like, I feel like that's, something that you definitely want to weigh into that decision of like, where's my kid? What makes him passionate about this game?
Yeah.
And what makes him like want to play this game and continue to practice this game? Because again, club baseball it's a financial investment, and it's not, we look at all these other organizations or even our organization, right? It's not cheap. Hotels cost money, travel costs money, uniforms cost money, fields cost money, like all this stuff, it adds up. And it's like, you want to make sure that you are making that, thought out decision with your own son, or kid about, where they're going to be able to, have their best time spent and money spent.
Yeah.
That segues into, our fourth inning, question, which goes on to, how does a parent know which select team or club team is the right fit? So once we've made that decision, like, okay, my son's ready, I want him to play club baseball, I think he's competitive, I know that he needs more, how do we make that decision of what organization? Because, again, in Houston, it's a huge hotbed. We've got tons and tons and tons of youth baseball organizations down here. What do you feel like makes that difference?
Well, I'll answer it here, and I'll say, when I decided Jackson was kind of ready, or when he decided he was ready to kind of move into a more competitive kind of baseball at going into our 8U season, I looked around, right, and I said, okay, well, number one, with my background, playing A&M and playing in the A's organization, I said, well, it's going to be really difficult, number one, to find someone that probably has the baseball knowledge, right? I don't want to be arrogant, I guess, but maybe that is. So I needed to have, he was going to have a coach that at least had a baseball background. So that was number one. Number two, I had a firm belief in team, right? Team chemistry is more important. Trying to keep core group of kids together. And if I have the theory still, and I talk to parents about this to this day, if they go to practice and then go home and go to practice and go home and go to their lessons and go home and then go to the tournaments on the weekends and go home, I mean, that's basically pro baseball, right? I mean, that's pro ball. Yeah. That's a job.
Minus the
weightlifting and maybe some extracurriculars after the games, that's pro baseball. And, club baseball select gets this bad rap for burning kids out, right? And some parents are probably concerned with that, right? I'm not going to burn my kid out because that's what select baseball has a bad rap for. I think it's more on the team and the organization, and a lot of times the parents for having, you need to embrace a team. You need to give them, hang out with teams after games and after practices. Go do lunches after games. Do birthday parties. If kids relate baseball to fun, they're going to want to go hit in the cage and get better. They're going to want to go with their dad or their brother or their teammates and go take extra ground balls. And they're ultimately going to get better from that in and of itself. So I was looking at that from a culture standpoint, and I really didn't see it out there in our area, And so that's when we kind of started the force, and here we are. So that was my take, anyways.
So basically, if you don't see it, you got to make it yourself. No, I'm just
yeah. I mean, I didn't see it out there, and so here we are. The three of us, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, John, I'd love to hear your input, because obviously you've got a young one, and y'all are about to make that jump to different organizations. Like, obviously, you already mentioned prior, like, you guys are wanting to come over to the Force, but what kind of played a role in your decision, not only making that decision, but just overall scope of the Southeast Houston area of like which organization should you go to?
Well, the Force is pretty easy for me because I'm on the board of it. So I kind of have to.
Yeah, I guess that makes it pretty easy.
I kind of have to go there. but Chris was a big driver in that too. So he answered that question perfectly. I mean, I think you got to go somewhere where the coaches are going to have a high level of experience and expertise. And like Chris said, it's not arrogant, but my background at the D1 level and in pro ball, and Chris's background at the D1 level and in pro ball, and your background in baseball, all those things are factors. And also, my philosophy aligns directly with Chris's. So we're going to produce major league ball players at the Force. That's going to happen over time. Now, that's going to take years to develop. That's going to take years, but it'll happen. I guarantee you it'll happen at some point. But what we're going to do is create great young men throughout the training that they have in the Force. And as a byproduct, a couple of those down the road are going to end up being major league ball players. But we're going to create a culture where young men can come in and learn all those things that Chris preaches about discipline, timeliness, team, attitude, all the things that we learned.
Yeah.
And that's one great thing about Division I baseball. It forces you to not be an I guy. And in our clubhouse at A&M, if you were an I guy, you got checked quickly. And everybody sort of fell in line with the way the program was running. And it was a cool thing. A little bit different in pro ball. Pro ball is definitely a every person out for themselves kind of environment. But even in pro ball, I mean, I played on some really good teams and we created a culture of teams. So, philosophically, for a parent that doesn't live in Southeast Houston listening to this, I would say make sure the organization has people that are going to create good human beings.
Yeah.
And as a byproduct of that, they're going to create world-class baseball players. And then, their mission and vision align with what you're after. As far as Southeast Houston goes, Chris and I have talked about this a lot. Even back in our day, we had numerous people that came out of this area, Clear Creek, Dobie, Galveston Ball, Elkins High School, Westbury High School, just to name a few, that ended up being really good players, high-level D1 players, pro ball players, major league players. And so our vision is to capture this elite talent that's in the area. Let's call it from Baytown to Galveston, over from Richmond, Rosenberg, all the way down. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't pluck a kid out of the Woodlands or Katy or whatever. But just in that southeast area or South Houston area, there's a lot of talent in there. It's just, forming that up and getting them on a good team and then proceeding accordingly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, understanding, and every parent is different, right? And every parent obviously goes without saying, but has the right to kind of choose what they feel like is best. What I think we do a pretty good job of with us anyways, is we're pretty transparent on what our beliefs are and what our philosophy is and what we're trying to accomplish and teach these kids. And we've talked about it, all three of us, ultimately it's bigger than baseball. It's beyond high school baseball. It's beyond baseball in general. And we want to use the gift that God gave us, which is being able to play baseball, to teach these kids life lessons through this great game, right? And that's going to carry them on throughout life, regardless of what happens in their athletic career, at 18 or 20 or whatever. But parents, there's going to be different sets of parents, and some of them want to win at all costs. And if you know that as a parent, then go look for that correct, organization or team that's going to offer that, right? If a parent wants the convenience of only playing within a 10-mile radius, there are teams out there. There's 700 and something select teams out in Houston. So you can definitely find one, right? Like that plays in a 5-mile radius, practices at the local place and never leaves the area. And that's the convenience factor. And that's great. That's going to be, that's a good fit for somebody, right? Yeah. There may be another organization out there that's a one-person team that is run by a group of dads, and they want to play with their neighborhood friends, and that's what they build, and they're going to stick with that moving forward. And you can find all sorts, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I think it's also cool to, or I guess maybe not so cool, but the youth. According to the Kansas University, right, youth sports is a $19 billion industry. Yeah, it's pretty large, right? I mean, you've got guys like, Hunter Pence and, all these big leaguers that are they're involved with youth organizations, youth sports, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand of that, I think some people sprint at the idea of dollar signs. And it's like, how do you avoid, being part of, oh man, this is just a money grab?
Yeah.
And how do you, vet an organization before you, become so involved with it and already kind of make that financial commitment?
Yeah. I think I encourage, as I take a ton of calls. I'm open to talk to anybody before tryouts and transparent with our philosophy and all that stuff. So I think that I think you can see, right, like at Force, we're 501c3, we're nonprofit. We have we're fortunate enough to have our own 4-acre, facility with 2 fields and cages, and you see the work that's been done over there. So I think all of those things, you kind of talk to the person, find the vision, find the philosophy, understand the philosophy, and then what they ultimately bring back to your child.
Yeah.
Again, 19 coaches that all played college baseball as part of our organization, as an example, plus 4.5 acres with 2 fields. That's pretty much, no one has that in this area, in the Southeast Houston area or South Houston area. So I think looking at that, saying, okay, they're giving back a lot, right? All that costs money, and that's and they're doing it for the right reasons. That's how I'd bet it, right?
Yeah, I definitely think too. I mean, even with the Force, like from my perspective, being a coach and involved, and it's like, I know sometimes that we're not always going to have like every single person in Houston come to this tryout, and we've got the top dogs of every area. But it's instilled in me as a coach and as a former player, like I'm going to develop whatever I have and make them the best that I have. And I feel like that's pretty sound across the board with our coaches. And and I know that's just not with the Force, right? Like, I mean, I've whenever I was growing up, I played with the Waco Storm in the Waco area.
Yeah.
And it's definitely very similar in that regard too. And then you have other organizations like, the Dallas Tigers, DBAT, Houston Heat, stuff like that, right? Where it's just like very big name organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have college coaches and college instruction. And I guess the biggest thing is really like, for me, from like a coach's perspective, is when I look at, a team, like I know that from my point of view, I'm going to do whatever I can to develop these kids. But I know I'm not everybody, right? And I know I'm not every coach, and it can easily get into, they're just trying to collect a paycheck and they're just trying to, make ends meet or whatever that is. Like, this is more of a job rather than this is something I do for fun. And I feel like that's something that, us as coaches and you being like the head of it all, right? I think that, you've done a great job of just like making sure that we're not just taking anybody from a coach's perspective, and we're actually vetting these guys to make sure that they truly do this for the love of the game and the love of pushing it forward. So
yeah, I think it goes back to transparency too. I talk to the coaches and tell them this is what we believe and this is who we're looking for, right?
Yep.
So,
hey, couple quick notes I want to add to that.
Yeah,
is look for affiliations too.
Yeah.
So you guys know we recently got into the 10U USA Baseball Invitational. Huge deal. Not easy to do. Through relationship and hard work and time, Chris and I were able to do that. That's a big deal if you're a high-level player, to know that we now have that level of affiliation with the premier amateur baseball organization in the world.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So look for those types of things too. I'm not saying a club has to have that, but if you have affiliations at that level, that separates a club and it legitimizes a club, in my opinion. Second thing is, I understand the finances of the Force because I'm on the board. And I can tell you that Chris is not getting rich, or nobody at the Force is getting rich off of baseball. So I think that's a misnomer out there. Yeah. And I've had people even ask me, and I'm not yet affiliated fully with the organization on the field. And they've even asked me those questions about, well, insinuating that I'm making money and I've never taken a penny from the force.
Yeah.
So I think people need to understand that it really isn't a money grab. It really is for developing kids. It really is for the love of the game. By the way, I personally think winning is a big part of development.
Yeah.
Some people don't. Some people say, hey, we're going to develop at all costs the individual. To me, winning is part of that. But again, if you look at affiliations and you look at, the financial side of it and the philosophy of it, then that gives you a pretty good idea whether you want to be affiliated with a team or not.
Yeah. I got a curveball here for you, John. And obviously when you were in I use the word, I had the first curveball of the season, by the way.
I'm ready for it, man. I'm ready for it, Sella. Let's go.
So you were
sit back on and drive it.
Yeah.
I'm not flaring it out to left field. Okay.
You were
drop the hammer on it.
In high school. You were the quarterback. Weren't you like a 3-year starter, 2-year starter, something like that in high school?
2.5. Yep.
Yeah,
that's right.
So, what's your take on kids playing? It's a hot topic in Twitter and all kinds of things. Kids playing multiple sports, or I guess the better way to put it is, some people believe you should specialize earlier, right? Only play baseball or only play football. What's your take on that from a youth perspective?
Well, I'm going to give you a hot sports opinion here, sir. I don't even know what your official take on this topic is. But I'm about to give you mine, Hunter. I don't know.
It's about to get heated.
No, I am a multi-sport guy all the way, and I know for a fact that Division I coaches, and I won't specify any, but I know for a fact that Division I coaches like multi-sport athletes.
Yeah.
And you also have to understand that baseball has become an upper crust sport, which is a problem that we could have a whole podcast on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's now a country club sport. It's now an affluent sport. It is what it is. And pretty much everything but football and basketball fall into that category. And you could make the argument that basketball is even going that way because of the AAU scene.
Yeah.
So you now have a sport where coaches at the highest level view players as having silver spoons in their mouth. They do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these coaches, a lot of these kids show up with, the nicest equipment from the time they're 7. By the way, my own son does. So I'm preaching to the choir here because I've already fallen victim to this.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling anybody what to do. Don't follow me because my son has really nice equipment and he's 7 years old. I did not. So long-winded way of saying specializing, getting the kid the best equipment, putting him on the best team, having ridiculously nice uniforms. All these things are cool, but I think diversity is good.
Yeah.
Teach them how to not play baseball all year round. Teach them how to go into a smelly, sorry locker room in junior high.
Yeah.
Teach them how to deal with people that are in different classes economically or socioeconomically with them. All these things are positive, and I think you're going to get that by playing other sports. Not Absolutely. To mention, I'm a firm believer that you develop skills in each sport that translate to whatever your true love is.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to hurt you. Now the problem is there's always going to be that kid that specializes in baseball and maybe isn't as good of an athlete as the next kid who does multi-sports, but that kid may have a leg up fundamentally, or they may have a leg up, just with experience. But I do believe all that comes out in the wash if you play multiple sports. But that's my take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to give my perspective on this too. I grew up in a very small town, graduated with like 56 people, like 2A public school. And I can firmly say that if I didn't play multiple sports, I would definitely not have played Division I baseball. Yeah. And, I was a very below average football player, but, I still had fun. I got to learn a lot of different sort of techniques to that really coordinated and correlated well with being in the outfield and allowing me to be super athletic. And it also allowed me to have more of a strength program, while I was playing football. And then, going into baseball season, I was doing track and baseball at the same time. And it's like, I would, run a track meet from noon to 5 and then get in a car and drive 3 hours to Glen Rose for a playoff baseball game. And I'd be starting on the bump and trying to blow people up. Right. And
Exhausted.
yeah. Like I just think like there's so much good things. There's only good things that can come out of playing multiple sports whenever you're young, even throughout high school.
Yeah.
And I know like whenever I was getting recruited in high school, like, Dan Fitzgerald, who's now the head coach at Kansas, like he was the recruiting coordinator at Dallas Baptist. And he told me, he was like, hey, like this is actually a huge thing. Like I know like it's a hot topic for kids to be playing football and kids to be playing other sports, like while you're committed. He was like, I want to urge you to continue to do that. If you're passionate about that, if you love to do that, he's like, I personally think this is going to help you develop as a player, as a young man, and it's going to just make you a better ball player in general for us when you get here.
Yeah.
And, hearing that firsthand, like that's all I needed to hear. And, went to my head football coach next morning. I was like, you're going to see me in the locker room tomorrow. I'm going to be ready. And things like that, it's just like, it's so prevalent in youth sports where it's like we get pigeonholed or we pigeonhole ourselves into just one sport and making that our entire focus. I mean, I think us as human beings, like that's kind of like we get this one thing that we love and we're passionate about and we just want to fixate on it. But in reality, like in sports, like we need to make it and take a step back. And it's like, this is truly for the love of the game. Like we don't want to make this bigger deal than it really is, because then you become this person and it starts to become your identity that, if you don't perform well or if you're not doing well, then now you're just like outside of baseball. It's like you're this zombie if things aren't going well.
Right. Yeah.
It's a great point.
And my take, I agree with both of y'all. Right? Like, I mean,
good.
All right.
I mean, Jackson he plays soccer. He played basketball this winter also. So I think, making them a well-rounded athlete is one of the keys, especially in the youth world. I played them growing up too. Once I got to high school, I kind of just went baseball. But if I wouldn't have, and Coach Johnson even said it to me, John, a couple of times. Had for a bigger guy, had good feet, and all that stuff. I attribute that to playing basketball my whole life growing up and playing soccer. And then not to mention, they learn to compete in different ways.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that probably the same people I talk to, and one of the biggest complaints is these kids get here and they're just kind of showcase guys and they don't know how to get out there and compete and dig in, I
remember that was big.
Coach Johnson. Oh, sorry, Hunter, go ahead.
No, you're good. You go ahead.
Coach Johnson told me that straight up too, Chris. He said if there was two kids that were equal and he saw that one played football or basketball or whatever, he would take that kid for that reason, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
But I think too, like, playing in football, football's a grind. Football's tough for a lot of different reasons, but playing football or basketball for sure, I think gives you a different edge. It gives you a different edge. And like you're saying, Chris, it just teaches you how to compete, which is good.
Yeah, definitely.
What about golf? I feel like that's the only regret I have in life is not playing golf as a kid. So my dad, if you're listening to this, Kevin, you should have had me in some golf classes. I'm just kidding.
Hunter, that's where I am right now, sir. My daughter's in a golf training this morning. So there you go.
Well, you won't catch me there because I can't tell you the last time I played a round of golf.
It was your dad.
Yep. It's all him. I guess the last thing that I just want to kind of get your perspective on is just like in the realm of youth sports or just youth baseball in general, if you had 5 minutes to tell every parent in the world what your take would be on advice to youth athletics, youth sports in general, what would that be?
Be summed up in one word: perspective. Perspective. Do the math. There's 30 MLB teams. There's 25 players on each roster. Look at the makeup of that roster. It's all over the globe. So So be realistic about your expectations. I'm not saying to not try to be a major league ball player. Every kid should. Every kid should. And by the way, I believe that we will have some that make it. That's the second time I've said that down the road. But just have perspective. Understand that this is a journey. You get one chance with your kid. Enjoy the time. Pick a team that you really like. Pick people that you like. Pick philosophies that you like and go with it. Just enjoy the ride. I think the insatiable appetite for competitiveness is pervasive in our society, and it's fun. I'm competitive too. I'm a very competitive person, but I have to remind myself too to keep perspective. These are kids. Let them enjoy the process and just enjoy playing a sport they love.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you obviously sharing with us and opening it up to us today. Now, moving on to our next episode to give you all a little bit of light. Our next topic that we're going to be covering is just how to build a team culture with your baseball program. So join us next time on the Fifth Inning Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Hunter Vansall, with my co-host, Chris Garcella, and you're listening to the Fifth Inning Podcast.
Appreciate it.